Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. I am here today to share the thing I am most passionate about when it comes to Magic the Gathering. When it comes to my live streams or even my comments on my videos, you will find a number of people asking me, hey, what do you like to play? Do you play Modern? Do you play Pioneer? Well, the answer is that I basically play Standard and Perp Cube. So I'm going to outline to you what my Perp Cube is, and we're going to talk about how you can build your own U Cube. The name of the cube, it's had a number of different names. We used to just call it the cube around here because you didn't have to worry about any kind of confusion. Everyone would just say, hey, grab your cube. But dealing with the internet, we ended up with a new concept. People think about cubing, they think about drafts and things like that, right? So the name cube didn't really work. We were using the name King Cube for a while to kind of differentiate it, but it turns out that's already a format as well. So now I am calling these U cubes. So I have my Perp Cube because I'm Perp. Habanero has his Spicy Cube because he's a spicy boy. You see how that works? So you will have your own individualized cube. So I'm going to tell you the framework of how to build one of your own cubes and also how to build your rule set for building the cube and how it plays, because everybody's cube is different. There's no two cubes that are alike. And actually at the end, I'm also going to give you access to the entirety of my cube if you wish to peruse through it. But first things first, let's talk about what my cube is and is not. So I have right here in this bag part of my cube. The other part of it is in a box. I'm in the process of double sleeving the whole thing. So how it works is my cube is currently 908 cards. This is going to throw some people off. Some people think of cube and they think, okay, draft cube, 360 cards. You break it up into little piles of 15 and everyone drafts with it. My cube is not designed for drafting. I was introduced to this concept by the inventor of the double strike mechanic along with that group of friends. The dude who invented double strike is from my part of the world, right? So him and his close friend group had their own cube. They introduced the concept to me. I got hooked on it. They originally learned about it from Toronto. It travels like a virus. Once you've played with a cube, you will want one of your own. It solves a bunch of problems with Magic. So how the cube works is I have 908 cards. They are all sleeved. You can see here's a pile of them right here. They just here's a random smattering of stuff from the cube. It doesn't matter if it's not really in focus because you're going to get the opportunity to look at the entire list of my cube when we're done here. I will have that available via Google Drive for you guys to check out. So when it comes time to play a game of cube, here's how it works. You grab out of the chunk of the cube, you put it on the table, deal everybody a hand of 7 cards. It's up to you to determine whether you're going to be playing multiplayer or just one-on-one. I mean, technically that's multiplayer too, but everybody knows what I mean when I say multiplayer. So you have to determine, are we playing 3 players? Are we playing 2 players? And actually when you build your cube, that's something you want to keep in mind as well. So you deal out a hand of 7 cards to each player. The deck is a communal deck. So everybody draws off the same pile. Everybody doesn't get their own deck. That also is something, however, you can choose. Understand that anything that I talk about, you can modify because this is a U cube and personalization is a big part of it. So, for example, this would be a starting hand that I would have of 7 different cards. Now, you'll notice something right off the bat. There are no lands in here. You will notice there are no basic lands. There's no other lands. There are a few lands in my cube with special abilities. But the way that lands operate in the cube is every turn, you're allowed to select 1 card from your hand, play it face down, and that is a land that taps for a mana of any color. You choose, no problem. Now, whether those lands will be considered basic lands, non-basic lands, whether they will be considered all land types, that's up to you. For my particular cube, these are all non-basic lands that tap for a mana of any color. When you put them face down, that's how it operates, right? So essentially, it gives you access to all colors of Magic, right? You don't have to worry. You can tap your lands for whatever you need, including if you need to tap for a colorless symbol, you can also tap lands for that with no issues. But they count as non-basic lands for cards like Ruination, for example, that destroy all non-basic lands, thus making Ruination a straight-up Armageddon in my particular cube. I've seen other approaches to this, where I've seen one where a cube where they considered the lands to be basic lands. I've considered one where they considered, like, basically you lay a land and you say, okay, this counts as a forest. I've seen ones where people consider them every type of land. So you lay a land and it is an island, a mountain, a swamp, all of that. And that will affect what cards you choose to put in your cube, right? For me, I don't have any kind of cards that specifically reference basic lands because there are no basic lands in the cube, so it doesn't make any sense to have that. So you have a shared deck you all draw off of. Nothing gets shuffled back into the deck, okay? Because the deck has no bottom. It essentially is endless. Like, you are grabbing out a chunk, but as you go through it, you'll grab more and more. There's no way to mill because it's a shared deck. Cards that allow you to scry and look at what's on top of the deck are quite powerful because they can be used to determine what your opponents get to draw. And you will find as you play with your particular cube that you have to make adjustments based on some cards being too strong for your cube. For example, because of the way my cube functions, you can't have Sensei's Divining Top because you can constantly use that to look at the top 3 cards of the deck and rearrange them. So you just get to keep controlling your opponent's draws. And it's okay to have effects that allow you to manipulate the top of the library and control your opponent's draws. However, ones that are so dominant and so cheap and let you run the game from the beginning tend to be too powerful for this build of cube. Now remember, the rules of the cube are loose in terms of you set your own rule set. So for me, it's shared library. You could decide we're gonna have individual libraries. With my cube, we have individual graveyards. So you'll have your graveyard, I'll have my graveyard. You play a land each turn and play Magic as normal. You have access to all the colors, as evidenced here again by this hand. I mean, look at, imagine trying to cast all this stuff. You've got a crazy random assortment of stuff. Now, I have crazy uncards in my cube. I have a wide rule set of what I allow. There are a few things that I don't allow into the cube. One of the most important changes I made personally for my cube compared to the cube I was introduced to when I started playing it is that I don't allow tutoring effects. And the reason for that is I found with my group of friends, when they did their cube with their tutoring effects, what they would do is just grab a random chunk of cards out of the cube, so you wouldn't have a uniform amount, and then the person was given 1 minute to go through that chunk of cards and try and pick something. But it can be overwhelming because there's a massive amount of stuff in the cube, right? Like, imagine trying to pick through this many cards in a minute for the situation that you're in to figure out what you need. It's a pretty daunting task, and it's boring and time-consuming for the people around you. So I don't actually allow any kind of tutoring effects in my cube whatsoever. There's no ability to search. Anything that we put on the bottom of the library just gets exiled because the cube technically has no bottom. You just keep going forever. But when it comes to cards that go on the top, sure. If someone puts something on the top, no problem. You can memory lapse a spell your opponent cast. Boom, it goes to the top of the deck, and you're going to draw it. So certain cards become far more powerful based on the circumstances. Memory lapse in regular Magic is, I'll counter your spell, put it back on top of your deck, right? But because you have a shared deck, all of a sudden, memory lapse turns into a counter target spell during your opponent's turn, and you're going to get to draw that on your turn. Or if you just want to slow them down, if they got some piece of junk, you can be like, you know what, I'll do it on my turn, depending on what it is. And it's like, here you go, you can try again next turn. But either way, it's important to pay attention to the differences that the way the cube operates by having a shared library. It's important to pay attention to what sort of advantages you can have in that way. So I'm trying to make sure that I cover everything. So if I repeat something in the video, my apologies. And at the end of the video, I mean, if you have any questions, by all means, leave them in the comments and I'll try and answer it. So you have a shared deck. Each player draws off of that shared deck. You play Magic regularly, like in most ways, it's just going to be what you're used to. You have your own individual graveyard. You play a land each turn if you want to. That taps for a mana of any color. And there are effects in the cube that allow you to return lands and other permanents to your hand. So you can use those to return lands to your hand. So at the beginning of the game, if you have really expensive casting cost cards, you can play them face down as a land, and there's a chance you may get a Ravnica bounce land or a boomerang or something else that will allow you to return the land to your hand, at which point you can look at all of your lands and decide which ones do I want to return to my hand. You can also look at your lands before you decide which ones to sacrifice. If you have a Zurin Orb out and you're sacrificing lands, you can go, oh, you know what, I'm going to choose this big creature land to sacrifice, put it in the graveyard. Oh, look at that, I have a reanimation spell. Boom, you get it back. So I feel like the cube is actually a really straightforward format. You play it with like the normal amount of life. It's really just a shared deck, access to all the colors of mana, and everybody has the basically roughly the same power level. When it comes to the actual building of the cube, you don't have to worry about trying to get a perfect color balance with this, right? You don't have to worry about going, okay, I need it to be 100 white cards, 100 green cards, 100 black cards. You don't need that. Now that's a fine starting point. If you're wondering where to start with a cube, grabbing 100 cards from each color of cards you think are fun, powerful, interesting, whatever it is, and piling them together, after you play with it for a bit, you'll start to get a vibe of what needs to go in and what needs to come out, right? Because if there are cards that no matter who draws them, they always get turned into land and never get played, there's no point in having those in your cube. So you'll get a feel for that and you'll start to pull it out. Now, it's very, very important to have a ton of answers in a cube, a ton of answers. Artifact destruction, enchantment destruction, creature destruction, all that stuff. Big board wipes, you need tons and tons of answers because the power level with one of these things is off the chain. Unless you decide specifically to nerf the power level of your cube by going, I'm only going to pick particular cards of a certain power level. I'm going to try and not have it be too powerful. But for me, because everyone has access to it, it's more fun to just put all the power, all the most powerful stuff you can get your hands on, shove it in there because both people have access to it. And with big, powerful cards, you can have the most insane game. Sometimes you'll have blowouts where you just elbow smash your opponent within a couple of turns and the whole game's over. But it can also lead to really interesting Titanic back and forth like wizard battles where it's like you're a massive planeswalker hurling insane life-ending spells at each other, one after the other. I've had some incredible comebacks with the cube, and I've also suffered some incredible, amazing defeats. With the sheer amount of cards that are involved and the power level, you can have a lot of random insanity. But again, don't focus on worrying about particular color balance. Worry about having the right kind of cards in there. What will most likely happen if your cube is like mine is you will find that you have like a larger amount of certain colors and other colors you have less of. Blue has a lot of crazy tricks, so you'll find you probably have a big blue pile. Black has a lot of creature destruction, which is essential. You need a ton of that, right? So those colors, like the green brings some interesting cards to the table, but green tends to be lesser represented because it doesn't have as many like auto-include sort of things. The different color stacks are not equal in my cube, but again, remember, everything I'm laying out for you here is open to your own particular interpretation. Decide what kind of cube you want it to be, because at the end of the day, you're designing a U cube. I'm only giving you mine as an example of like a starting point, essentially, right? Where it's like, here's what a cube is. You can change any of the rules. You can allow tutoring in your cube. If you want to, you can let people play 2 lands a turn. You can have the lands represent however you want. If you want to just go, we only use this part of the cube and there is a bottom of the deck, you can do that. There are no hard and fast set rules for this. People who are watching this video, some of them will probably go, oh, your cube is just like this format, but it won't be identical, right? They'll be like, oh, you're playing Big Fat Stack 4 or something like that, but it's not really. It's somewhat like that, but there's variation. So understand that you're in control of this cube. You decide everything that happens with it. Just play essentially a normal game of Magic where you're drawing off a shared deck, have your own graveyards, and you can lay a land each turn that taps for a mana of any color. I feel like I've covered pretty much most of what you need to know about a cube. Now let's talk about my cube list specifically, all right? I focus on putting in tons of answers. I focus on putting in tons of card draw because the power level of the cube is so high that card draw is incredibly powerful. Digging deeper into the cube is super powerful. One card can turn things around. I absolutely allow and love putting in weird unzaniness, and you can have fun with it. You can get things like super secret tech, which makes it so that all of your foil cards have +1/+1, and costs 1 less mana to cast, and that's an incentive to keep pimping up the level of the cube. It's a very enjoyable shared experience. So I mentioned that I have a Google Drive listing of all of the cards that are in my cube, and I'm going to have that linked in the description of this video. So you can take a look at it. Now, the way that they are labeled, you'll notice there'll be some letters after some of the cards. If it says F after the name of a card, like if it says Questing Beast F, that means I currently have a foil Questing Beast in there. And this is because this is a mirror of my particular database I'm using to keep track. Like all the images and everything and the names, that's my personal file folder I'm using to keep track of the cube. And because I want to upgrade everything into foils, I'm noting which things are foil and which aren't. So you'll see F for foil, you'll see P for promo. I've tried to pick the exact edition of the cards that I have as well, so that that matches up. And some of them may say things like fan or fan alt, and those are like fan alternate arts, where either somebody has fan alt or painted a card for me, or in some other fashion created a altar for me to include in the cube. Now, there's not many of those, and if there is some kind of code that you notice in there that you don't know what it is, feel free to leave a comment on the video saying, yo, what does this stand for in the database? And on an added note, if you're anybody who's wanted to contribute to my cube, you can take a look at that list. Anything in there that I don't have a foil version of, I am looking for a foil version. So obviously I'll be a happy pappy if you send me one of those out. I'm looking to upgrade everything even up to like masterpiece levels, right? Bit by bit, I'm going to increase and improve the cube. I have a number of cards that I'm excited about adding into it. I have products I'm going to be opening specifically to add to my cube, like this lovely little fairy deck that Imperium Games sent out to me, a very nice gift. So overall, I feel like I've covered everything about the cube, but as it is when explaining things to people, everything's lodged up here and it's all second nature to me because I've had my cube for well over a decade. I may have missed out on some information that you feel is crucial, so by all means, questions are encouraged. I definitely encourage you to build one of these cubes. It is absolutely the most fun way to play Magic, and nothing that goes wrong with Magic can ever affect your cube, right? It doesn't matter if Wizards of the Coast is making decisions you don't like. It doesn't matter if Magic's getting too expensive for you to play Standard or anything like that. The cube is something you can build on any level with what you already have, and it's just pure joy of Magic. There's a lot of diversity, a lot of randomness, and a lot of fun waiting for you, my friends. So I encourage you to get on board and build your own cube. Even if it's a small one to start with, you don't need a 908 card cube. Your cube can be any size that you want. I'm not even reining mine in. I'm probably going to grow it by another 200 or so cards, but I do need a bunch of perfect fits. Speaking of that, my birthday's coming up, so if you want to get me some perfect fits or something else, I do have an Amazon wish list. Feel free to check it out. Now, again, one final time, there are no wrong questions when it comes to the cube, so by all means, leave any comments that you have, any questions you have about this concept, and I will happily answer them for you. Thank you, everybody, for coming by. Big shout out to all my patrons and channel members for supporting what I do here. It does mean a lot to me. And remember, together, we are the sixth color of Magic.